Before we begin, remember this. Even the calmest waters can hide a storm beneath the surface. When Keanu Reeves walked into the View studio that morning, he expected nothing more than a friendly chat, a little laughter, some warmth, a chance to speak about art and kindness. What he found instead was an ambush disguised as conversation. In an industry that thrives on outrage, one man's silence became his rebellion, and one host's arrogance became her undoing. The studio lights of The View glowed with practiced perfection, washing the familiar set in soft gold and coral tones. It was an ordinary Tuesday, or at least it was supposed to be. Producers moved briskly behind the cameras, whispering instructions, balancing schedules, ensuring that this morning's headline guest was treated like Hollywood royalty. And he was. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in the green room, his posture relaxed yet dignified. Dressed in a charcoal suit with an open-cord black shirt, he looked more philosopher than action star. Crew members greeted him respectfully, some even nervously. There was something disarming about his presence, the mix of humility and strength, of stillness and warmth. He thanked the makeup artist after she'd finished with a gentle smile. "You made me look less tired," he said softly, earning a laugh. Then he went back to sipping his tea, alone with his thoughts. For him, this was just another stop in a long press tour. The Guardian resurgence had shattered box office projections, and the world couldn't get enough of its stoic, quietly heroic star. But on the other side of that studio wall, Joy Behar was loading ammunition. At 81, she had nothing left to prove, or so people thought. Yet every morning, she came armed with notes scribbled in red ink, determined to challenge, to provoke, to dominate. Today's cards contained one name in bold at the top: Keanu Reeves. Below it, underlined twice, were 4 words: refuses to take sides. Joy Behar didn't dislike Keanu personally. In truth, she resented what he represented: quiet decency in a world where decency no longer sold. To her, his silence on political matters wasn't virtue. It was avoidance, and she was going to expose it, live in front of millions. When the show began, Whoopi Goldberg welcomed the audience with her usual warm authority. The applause was thunderous. "We've got a very special guest today," she announced. "A man whose films have inspired a generation and whose kindness is almost legendary. Please welcome Keanu Reeves." The doors opened. Keanu walked out smiling modestly, waving to the crowd. The energy in the studio shifted instantly. Admiration, affection. He shook Whoopi's hand, then greeted each host one by one. Sunny Hostin, polite handshake; Sarah Haynes, bright smile; Alyssa Farah Griffin, genuine warmth; and finally Joy Behar. She didn't stand. She extended her hand lazily, lips pursed in what might have been a smile. "Keanu," she said, tone cool. "Finally decided to visit daytime TV, huh?" Keanu's grin didn't falter. "I go where the stories are told," he replied, his voice calm, measured. "And this seems like a place with a lot of stories." The audience chuckled. Joy didn't. For the first 15 minutes, everything was as smooth as silk. Whoopi led with film questions. Keanu spoke about the emotional depth of the Guardian resurgence, about loss, redemption, and the quiet dignity of doing what's right. Sunny chimed in with admiration for his charity work. Sarah asked about his philosophy on fame. Keanu responded with that same calm humility that had made him a global icon. Then, mid-con conversation, Joy leaned forward, cutting through the warmth like a blade. "So, Keanu," she began, her tone deceptively casual, "you've built this image of being the nice guy of Hollywood. Always kind, always quiet, never controversial. But some people wonder if that's just convenient." The air shifted. Whoopi's eyes flicked toward Joy in warning. Sarah looked down at her cards. Keanu blinked once, his expression unchanged. "Convenient? Well," Joy continued, "you've got this huge platform, millions of fans who listen to every word you say, and yet you never use it to talk about what's really happening in the world. Injustice, politics, the big stuff. Why stay silent when you could make a difference?" Keanu nodded slowly, thoughtful. "I try to make a difference through how I live," he said. "I believe kindness is action, not performance." A few people in the audience clapped softly. Joy's lips tightened. "So kindness is enough, huh? You don't think people need to stand for something?" "I do stand for something," he replied gently. "I just don't need to shout it." The studio went quiet for a moment. Whoopi tried to steer back to safer waters, but the damage was done. The tone had shifted, the warmth replaced by tension, the admiration by scrutiny. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged uneasy glances. Something real was happening on The View, something raw and unscripted. Keanu Reeves remained composed, shoulders relaxed, eyes calm, voice steady, but the storm had begun to brew. Enjoy Behar, sensing it, smiled. The applause sign flickered once more, and the lights dimmed for a quick commercial break. Assistants hurried onto the stage with makeup brushes and water bottles. Joy Behar sat perfectly still, tapping her pen against the table like a ticking clock. Her mind was already rehearsing the next line of attack. Keanu, meanwhile, leaned back in his chair, sipping from a small paper cup. His composure was remarkable, calm, polite, almost serene. The chaos around him didn't seem to reach him. It was as though he operated on a different frequency altogether. Whoopi glanced at him with a faint smile. "You're holding up okay?" she asked softly. He nodded. "I've faced tougher critics," he said. They both chuckled, but Joy wasn't laughing. When the cameras came back live, the tone was immediately different. The first segment had been polite. This one would not be. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi began, her voice steady. "We're here with the wonderful Keanu Reeves, whose latest film, The Guardian, Resurgence, has been breaking box office records worldwide." The audience cheered again. Keanu smiled, thanking them with a nod. But then Joy leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, her voice slicing through the cheer like a blade through silk. "So, Keanu," she began, "you said earlier that you believe in living your values quietly, that actions matter more than words. But don't you think that's a little outdated?" Keanu blinked, surprised but polite. "Outdated? Yes." Joy pressed on. "In today's world, silence is complicity. Don't you think people with platforms like yours have an obligation to speak out, especially when we see so much injustice?" There was a murmur in the audience. Some nodded, others frowned. Keanu took a slow breath. "I think we all have a responsibility to make the world better," he said gently. "I just don't believe shouting louder necessarily helps. Sometimes real change happens in small, quiet acts." Joy tilted her head, pretending to consider his words. "So, you're saying the rest of us, the people who do speak up, we're just shouting?" Keanu shook his head. "Not at all. I'm saying everyone contributes in their own way. Some speak, some build, some heal, some listen." It was an answer both humble and disarming. But Joy wasn't looking for balance. "Well," she said, her smile tightening, "that's a very convenient philosophy for someone who doesn't like taking risks." The air in the studio thickened. Whoopi glanced toward the producers. She could tell where this was going. "Joy," she warned quietly. But Joy waved her off. "No, I mean it," she said. "You've made hundreds of millions of dollars from movies that glorify violence, that show men fighting for what's right, and yet when it comes to the real world, you're silent. Doesn't that strike you as a little hypocritical?" The audience gasped. A few nervous laughs broke out. Keanu looked at her for a long moment, not angry, not defensive, just quietly stunned by the audacity. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, steady, and controlled. "I think there's a difference between portraying conflict and causing it," he said. "Stories are mirrors. They show us what we're capable of, good and bad. But I don't confuse what I play on screen with who I am. Right?" Joy replied with a smirk. "So, you can pretend to fight evil, but can't talk about it when it's real?" Whoopi sighed audibly. "Joy, come on." "No, I want to understand this." Joy interrupted, eyes narrowing. "You make your living off heroism. But when it comes to actual courage, you're quiet. That's not humility, Keanu. That's comfort." The silence after that sentence was total. Even the crew had stopped moving. Keanu leaned forward slightly. The calm in his voice was the kind that precedes a storm. "Comfort," he repeated softly. "You think my silence comes from comfort?" Joy folded her arms. "That's what it looks like." Keanu nodded once slowly. And for the first time, the warmth in his face faded. What replaced it wasn't anger, but conviction. "I grew up sleeping on floors," he said quietly. "I lost friends before I was old enough to understand why. I've spent most of my adult life surrounded by grief and noise and judgment. And through all of it, I learned something. Shouting doesn't heal pain. Listening does. Acting quietly does. Being kind when no one's watching does." The studio erupted in applause. Loud, heartfelt, spontaneous. Joy's expression faltered for the first time. Whoopi leaned back in her chair, giving Keanu a small nod. The kind that said, "Well said, my friend." But Joy wasn't finished. She waited for the applause to fade, then said coldly, "So kindness is your activism. That's cute." The words hit like a slap. The audience murmured again, this time not approvingly. Keanu didn't move. He didn't flinch, but something in the air shifted. Even the light seemed harsher now.